My name is Ian Jansen, and I'm a professor of kinesiology and public health at Queen's University. I led the portion of the guidelines that dealt with the integration of all movement behaviors across the 24-hour period. The citation details for our systematic review on this topic area are provided at the bottom of this slide. There were three key take-home messages from our systematic review. The first is that the composition of movement behaviors, that being sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activity, across the entire 24-hour day is important and associated with health. Secondly, changing the movement behavior composition is associated with changes in health. And third, recommendations for sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activity should be combined into a single public health guideline. By way of background, it's important for us to recognize that sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activity form a 24-hour movement behavior composition. What that means is that time spent in sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activities of different intensities must add up to 24 hours. The image on the right is an example of a movement behavior composition that is comprised of 7 hours of sleep, 11 hours of sedentary time, 4 hours of light physical activity, and 2 hours of moderate to vigorous physical activity. Compositional data analysis is a branch of statistics suited to examining the health effects of the 24-hour movement behavior composition. To this point, compositional data analysis literature is in its infancy and it has not been systematically reviewed. Our systematic review aimed to answer the following research question. Is the composition of time spent in sleep, sedentary behavior, light physical activity, and moderate to vigorous physical activity associated with health in adult populations? Our systematic review was conducted using a rigorous and transparent process that involved creating a detailed protocol, conducting extensive literature searches, screening records against inclusion criteria, extracting relevant data, grading the quality of evidence using an established tool, and compiling, synthesizing, and interpreting the evidence. It is important to recognize that this entire process was done under consultation with the leadership team responsible for developing the 24-hour movement guidelines. The three key findings from our systematic review are that the 24-hour movement behavior composition is important. Reallocating time into moderate to vigorous physical activity will benefit health, and reallocating time out of sedentary behavior will benefit health. So just to elaborate on those key findings, our first key finding was that the 24-hour movement behavior composition is associated with a variety of health outcomes. In other words, the composition of time, or the proportion of time devoted to sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activities of different intensities across the 24-hour period is associated with a variety of health outcomes, including mortality, cardiometabolic risk factors, body composition, and measures of mental health. Our second key finding was that reallocating more time into moderate to vigorous physical activity from any of the other movement behaviors is associated with health benefits. In other words, if you started with a baseline 24-hour movement behavior composition as shown on the left of this figure and shifted that to the composition shown on the right of this figure, where a much greater allotment of time is devoted to moderate to vigorous physical activity and time was taken out of any or all of the other movement behaviors, we would anticipate that this shift in the 24-hour movement behavior composition is associated with health benefits. Our third key finding was that reallocating some sedentary time into any of the other movement behaviors is associated with health benefits. So in this instance, if we started with the movement behavior composition on the left, remove time out of sedentary behavior and put that into sleep, light physical activity, moderate to vigorous physical activity, or some combination of these behaviors, we would anticipate the health of the individual would improve. There are two sentences within the 24-hour movement guidelines that reflect the findings of the compositional data analysis systematic review. First, at the top of the guidelines, there's an opening statement that indicates that, for health benefits, adults should be physically active each day, minimize sedentary behavior, and achieve sufficient sleep. Second, the closing of the guidelines indicates that replacing sedentary behavior with additional physical activity and trading light physical activity for more moderate to vigorous physical activity while preserving sufficient sleep can provide greater health benefits. The findings from this systematic review have important implications for public health. Specifically, they indicate that recommendations for sleep, sedentary behavior, and physical activity should be combined into a single guideline rather than having separate guidelines for these individual movement behaviors. This is because the overall 24-hour movement behavior composition itself is important for health. I'm going to conclude this presentation with two of the public-facing messages that will be delivered with the guidelines. And both of these messages, as you will see, speak to the integrated nature of movement behaviors. Make your whole day matter. Move more, reduce sedentary behavior, sleep well.